I've had several people ask me over the last couple of weeks how to add fields specifically to the group profile screen. Most of them have been how to add a field for the second deposit due date, so I'm just going to make this video to actually walk you through that exact item. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to your Manage Generics and Edit Fields. Now only admins can do this, so if you're an IC under an account, you will want to show this video to your agency admin so they can add it. But I'm going to click on Edit Fields. Now this is where a lot of people are getting stuck with this, because normally you're going to select the screen that you want it to go on, but there's no screen for group. And the reason for that is because the group profile and the client profile screen are actually the exact same screen to the back end of the system. It just looks differently depending on which screen you're actually on. So in here we're going to select profile to just narrow the listing down here to only the profile screen. And then we also want to select the section of profile details. Now again, the client screen, client profile screen, the profile details is the same section as the group details. They're just labeled differently on the different screens. So now I've narrowed this listing down to only the fields that are in there. Now normally if you're adding something to, say, the reservation screen, you can just look at the position and decide where you want it to go in relation to the other items on that screen. But this one's a little bit more tricky because it is shared across two different screens, the client profile and the group profile screen. So you'll see here, you can see I've got things from obviously from the client profile screen, like first name, nickname, middle name, last name, stuff like that. But as we scroll down, you will find other things that are just for the group, like group type here, or several other ones I'm sure, group supplier or reservation type. Those are only on there. So what I always do is I open the screen that I want to edit just to kind of look at the layout and figure out where I want that new field to go. Now in this case, after final payment date, I've got this empty space here that I could put something, but in my opinion it makes more sense if we're going left to right to put the second deposit due date first and then the final payment due date. So basically I want the second deposit date to go here, and I want to push this over to this empty space here. So what I want to do is find what position this is on my field listing here. So we just scroll through and it turns out it's position 35. So just keep that in mind. Remember that number because that's the position we're going to add our new field to, which will push this down to 36 and everything else will shift down by 1 as well. So 35 is where we want to put it. So I'm going to go up here to add new field. Now the field name isn't super important. This is just really for the back end of the system. There are a couple of requirements though. You can't use any spaces or special characters. I believe it has to be all capital letters. You can have numbers, but you can't start it with a number. So start it with a letter. Again, it's really not that important as long as it's unique to this screen. And you don't have any special characters, spaces, starting with numbers, things like that. So let's just make it really easy. Let's just do second underscore deposit. Now the field title is what you are actually going to see on screen. And if you're an agency owner with ICs, what your ICs will see as well. So you do want to write it out so they know what that field is for. So in this case, we'll just write second deposit due date. And we're going to leave the display type as text box. However, we're going to change the data type to date. Now this is important because a lot of this stuff like the display type and the data type you cannot change after you save. So if you just go through here real quick, you forget to do this and click save, it's going to be grayed out and you're going to have to delete it and start over again. So be sure before you save you've done everything you need to do. Now remember that 35 I mentioned a minute ago, that's the position I want to put that because I want to push everything else down, including the final payment due date. Now you have a couple of other options here. So new line, most of VCRM has 2 columns. So if we look at this screen, let's say I didn't want to move this over. I wanted to put second deposit due date after the final payment date, but I didn't want it in its own little column here. I wanted it right under that. If I selected position 36, technically it would go right there. But if I selected position 36 and checked the box for new line, it would not put it over here. It would put it on this new line here. But we're not going to do that because we're just going to push this over. So we'll have second deposit due date, then final payment due date. We do want it to display. If you uncheck that, it won't show. We don't want to make it required because if it's required, you have to enter that before you can ever save that uh, group profile screen. And oftentimes early on, you don't know the second deposit due date yet, or final payment due date for that matter. So you don't want to make it required. You don't want to make it read only. That will just gray it out. Don't want it to default to today's date. We don't need it on the quick profile screen. Now these two boxes here, since this is shared with the client profile screen, if I don't check either of these boxes, this new field will only show up on the client profile screen, which we don't want because that makes zero sense, because individual people don't have a second deposit due date. That's more related to a trip they've booked. So we don't want it. We don't want to leave them both unchecked. If you check just this box, it will not only show on the client profile screen but also on the group profile screen, which we also don't want because again, this makes no sense to ever show up on the client profile screen. So in this case, we're actually going to check this box only to only display on the group profile screen. And then finally, we've got only editable by admins. You don't want that either because that means only you, the admin, can edit this. It will be grayed out for everyone else, which makes no sense. So double check. You've got date as the data type, text box, position 35. We're good there. I'm just going to go ahead and click save. And now, once this reloads, if we scroll down through here, you will see it is position 35 and it's moved final payment date down to position 36. So we're good there. And what I always do just to double check is I go back to that screen that I was on and just refresh it to see where it's going to stick that. So now you can see I've got second deposit due date here, and then I've got final payment date here. And another benefit to adding extra date boxes in here is then once you've done that, if you want to use set up an email group, you can have this be a trigger for when those emails are sent. So if I go into, let's say, my utilities and my email groups here, and let's find one that's profile for group profile. So I honestly have no clue what's in here, but let's just go for this one. Let's say I want to send an email to let a client know their second deposit is due if they haven't already paid enough money to cover that. So when I add a new task, I would name it, second deposit email, put the subject, put the body where I tell them, hey client, if you haven't already paid X amount of dollars towards your trip, your second deposit is due by this date. And then you can use that as a trigger date now. So we've got second deposit due. I could say I want to send that, say, 7 days before that date. And then once you've done that, it will use whatever date you've entered in here as the trigger for sending that email. So that's all there is to it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but I think this should get you up and running with that. Thank you.